Alone, therefore, means that I really do not need another person. But let me tell you something. This might shock you. This is my philosophy. I don't find it in the Bible, but this is my philosophy. Every one of you men who are here, whether you're married or not married, I believe, honestly, that there is more than one woman out there right for you. So before they started, this fellow shoot me. Every woman in here, I believe that there is more than one man somewhere out there right for you. But you can only get them one at a time. Trust me. Or else, how come people have very good marriages, one dies, and they marry a second time, and they still have another good marriage? It's because there's more than one out there for you. But God said, only one at a time. So why is it there are some people with relationships and some people without relationships? Why is it there are some people lonely and some people not so lonely? It's not the environment. Because you could have two people living in the same neighborhood. One house here, loneliness. Another house here, happiness. Without loneliness. So it's not the environment, that's for sure. But we'll try and find out what may have caused that. So here's what it is. Alone, you could be alone, and you could be alone but not lonely. Follow with me now. You could be alone, meaning you're whole, everything, but you are not lonely. You are single, but you're not lonely. You could be lonely, but not alone. There are married people who are lonely. Because the relationship they are in is not what Adam got. Somebody right for him. Somebody comparable to him. Somebody that could answer him. And there are a number of lonely people in marriages feeling trapped. See how the church get quiet? So you could be alone, but not lonely. You could be lonely, but not alone. But also, you could be alone and lonely. Which means you're single, there's no one, and you are lonely. So what does lonely mean? Lonely means longing for another. I really want somebody else in my life. Long for another. And to be able to, whether it is to complete me or to be able to fulfill me. So, let me tell you. Loneliness is something we pretend not to be. We always pretend not to be lonely. So I remember my wife left to the States to have our child. So I'm a bachelor all of a sudden. Now I left my mother's house and then moved straight into marriage. Unlike some people who experience what bachelorhood was like. So they know what it is like to go home, meet an empty house, and so on. I never had that. But she's now away. There is that daunting spirit that hits me whenever I turn the corner and then my house is on a hill. And that hill is in blackness. No lights. I dreaded going home. It was just so lonely. And you go up there, and you turn the key in the lock, and you walk, and your footsteps echo. Every time you turn a pan, it is amplified in the house. Everything is just there, and you go to the room, and you push the room, nobody is there. You look on the stove, it's just the way you left it this morning. That's a daunting feeling. Some people live like that, I just had it temporarily. But there are some people living by themselves and just experience that as an everyday thing. It is day in, day out. Grandparents sometimes experience that because their children are all grown and now out. This is why I say, let's keep in touch with our grandparents. Because some of them, it is loneliness having them sick. And sometimes they call sick willfully so that you could just pass across with the grandchildren so that they could see. Yeah, I'm telling you. We need to be able to help these people. There are people who are in institutions, in hospitals, in daycare, or whatever, the home of the aged, who really are experiencing loneliness. There's a lady that was, her children put her in this whole old age home because they didn't want to have to fight up with her and work and so on. And that lady walked for near 8 hours. Old lady. They were shocked when they met the lady on the road, still walking, going back home, They picked her up, took her back to the home, and said, "Ma, you got to stay there." The next morning, she was dead. But there's no cause. You know what killed her? Loneliness. Loneliness is a terrible thing. It's a killer. A silent killer. So therefore, let's not allow loneliness. There are people who have relocated. There are some of you who are living in St. Thomas, probably did not born in St. Thomas. You know what it is to marry, to go into a country with your husband, or you're now starting a family and you don't know anybody there? Anybody knows what I'm talking about? It could be quite lonely. So you have people who have done relocation. There are some people who have lost a loved one, sometimes suddenly, and could not fill that void with anybody else. It's just a void that's always there. So let me tell you some of the facts of loneliness. Loneliness really is more a state of your mind than it is in reality. Because every lonely point in our lives we can fill if we want to. There are single people who have no right being single. They can feel it. There are married people who have no right to be lonely. It can be filled. If we are willing to do the necessary adjustments in order to fill that life that we have of loneliness. But also it is temporary, because it does not have to be long. It is only temporary. If loneliness stays in somebody's heart for too long, it becomes unhealthy. Sometimes you sit at the airport, or you watch people in the supermarket. You look at their faces, you look at their demeanor, and you could tell that this is a lonely, lonely person. Because sometimes we wear it on our faces. Loneliness. Sometimes we take what we have so much for granted. I'll tell you what we take for granted also. A lady would get married. This happens most times, quite often also with men too, so let me be equal. They get married. Now that they're married, they settle down, they put on weight. Because as far as they're concerned, the cat already in the bag. Sometimes I just meet people at home, and I just watch at their eyes, and I say, "You got married?" "Yes, I got married 3 months ago." I said, "Well, good." Because sometimes we just let ourselves go. Some of the men, all of a sudden, they're pushing a punch. All of a sudden. Well, I say it's because I eat in home now. Every time I go home, the wife want to make sure that I eat before I go to bed, and that putting on this side. But also, let me tell you, I could tell when people divorce or separated. They start to look good. I met a lady I in a function. I don't see this lady in any of the functions that I attend. But I know she works in one of the financial institutions and so on. But she's never in any of these social. So I went up to her and I said, "How are things going?" She said, "Yes, I'm going good." I said, "You enjoying the functions?" She said, "Yes," and so on. I said, "Well, I don't usually see you here. I say, well, I just come out because, things between me and the husband separate and so on. I said, there it is. And when we started to discuss, one of the problems the husband had, she used to go nowhere. Does that sound like anybody? Don't put up any hands. But now she's going places. Sometimes you look at how they start dressing. You see them in the gym. You could tell yourself, that's a marriage on the rocks. They start to take care of themselves until the next guy they meet. They get married and the cycle starts all over again. We really take some stuff for granted. And let me just say this. Christian relationships, we take too much stuff for granted. And my husband is a Christian, so therefore nothing is really going to happen. I'm safe. My wife is a Christian. I'm safe. And we don't take stuff seriously in our relationships. And that's why you have so many lonely people hanging around. So many people who are not comfortable with who they are. So, marriage is honorable in all the Bible says, and the bed undefiled. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, 1-8, the Bible does say, it is good for a man not to marry. Wow! And then Paul came down and said, but if you have a problem, go ahead and marry. If you cannot contain, go ahead and marry. So let's talk about some of the things, the conditions of getting married. How many single people do we have here tonight? How many single people? Unmarried. Wow, good, wonderful. And how many people on the brink of being single again? Let me just see. Don't put up your hand. Miss Lady, put down your hand, please. This would help us to be able to understand what we should be doing. And those of us who have done it already would be able to reflect and find out whether we really did it right. Now, Brother Thaddeus and Sister Bruno have 3 lovely dogs. These are dogs that are not your ordinary pot-hung yard dogs. These are dogs of something we call pedigree. You hear me? Pedigree dogs cost a lot to buy and to maintain. Especially if it's a pure breed. Cost even more. A horse that is running in a race, you go and you buy that horse. It's the pedigree that determines the cost of the horse. His mother was this, his grandfather was this, his great-grandfather won this race, this derby and so on, and you pay for that years down the road. A pumpet, whatever it is the pedigree.